So thank you all for coming. I hope I can squeeze all of this into your brief lunch hour. So I might go a little bit quick, and please excuse me if I do, but I'm hoping we can have some time for questions at the end. So as Carolina just mentioned, this is all about wetlands and waterfowl and hunting and what lead pollution does to these kinds of environments and to health overall. So as you can see here, many of the wetlands in Argentina are a huge, huge hotspot for waterfowl. And because of that, they attract hunters from all over the world. Especially for the last 20 years, this has become a very profitable industry. So what happens is when you start looking at the numbers of animals that are hunted, the numbers get pretty high very quickly. So if there are about 4,000 hunter days in the hunting season every year, it's only about 3 months of hunting season. So when you do very conservative estimates, you can calculate that about 100,000 ducks are taken per season. If you consider that those 100,000 ducks require about 3 to 5 shots per duck, some of them hit the target, many often miss, then that leads to about 10 to 15 tons of lead being poured into the environment, because I didn't say this, but the only kind of ammunition currently available in Argentina is lead shot. So the numbers in terms of the amount of lead that is being poured into the environment every year is really, really significant. If you consider that this accumulates over time, then the numbers are really daunting. So why is lead in the environment a concern? And the reason is because lead in the environment, once it leaves the cartridge for hunting, it can either hit the target species, and then because those species are eaten by people, end up in people, or the dead animals can be left in the field and then eaten by scavengers and predators, or if they're not dead all the way. And also, when they decompose, they absolutely, enter the ecosystem and the food chain in other ways. Whatever cartridge does not hit a target then actually stays in the environment, where one of the biggest issues is the ingestion of the spent shot by waterfowl, particularly ducks. And in that way, again, because these animals tend to get sick or die from lead exposure, also enter the ecosystem and the food chain. So basically, there are many, many species of all sorts that are in which lead shot ingestion or lead accumulation has been documented. But the majority of these are water birds, both ducks and hunted species, but also other species as well. And then the other group that is really heavily hit is scavengers and raptors, specifically. So this has become a huge health issue for these species. And the way that lead actually gets into these animals, for the most part, is through ingestion. In the case of ducks, it is because they eat the lead shot, the spent shot, as grit. And then once it enters their stomachs, it degrades, and then it actually, through the bloodstream, goes and hits very many organs and tissues in their bodies and remains there over time. So this is a toxin, a poison that accumulates over the lifetime of these animals. It is very well known that lead has many, many bad impacts on animals, specifically in water birds. It is known to cause physiological, reproductive, neurological, behavioral, and immunological changes, and many times leading to death, oftentimes also leading to poor fitness first, or only that as well. And the impact of this has been quite significant. So these are the countries in the world in which chronic losses of by lead ingestion have been documented. And in the case of the U.S. and some other countries, this is places where severe mortality outbreaks have occurred from lead pellet ingestion associated to hunting. So lead is not only a problem for animals, it is also a big problem for humans, and this you might know just from normal life. So it has huge, all kinds of impacts in adults and especially in children. everything from neurological damage to kidney failure and targeting reproductive organs and many other issues. So it is a very significant human health concern as well, with documented changes in IQ of people who are exposed when they're kids, and actually studies showing that there are parts in the brain that actually do not get developed in adults when they are exposed to lead in their childhood. So this is one of the reasons why lead has been banned from almost every single use that used to occur probably before you were born. But in the old days, lead was used in paint, and it was used even in toys for children, like little lead soldiers and things like that. But lead is no longer used in for these things because it is extremely poisonous to humans. As you can see, the issue of lead poisoning and lead pollution is really a One Health issue. It clearly affects the health of all of the components in this classic triangle, affecting humans, affecting the wildlife, and affecting their environments directly upon which all of these rely on. So the study I wanted to focus on is one that we've done for several years now. Our field studies occurred between 2007 and 2012, and we focused in the northeastern. This is South America, Argentina here, and this is the northeastern section of Argentina where most of the wetlands occur and are very significant for waterfowl as well. So we studied lead toxicity issues associated to hunting and waterfowl in both rice fields and also in natural wetlands. And these are both kinds of sites where hunting occurs. In rice fields, it is used as a control method for ducks damaging the crops. So we actually took samples from the environment to see how much lead was available for the wildlife, and also what the impact might be for the rest of the ecosystem. So we, in soil cores, these are chunks of soil that we dug up from the wetlands, and you can see there some of the little lead pellets. Those are taken, it's kind of like an X-ray of the soil. And we found very significant numbers of lead pellets. These numbers up here, 141 pellets per meter square, are pretty similar to the highest or most polluted areas in Spain, for example, where they have a history of 100 years of hunting, not 20 like we do. Yet we found very, very significant high levels of lead pellets in these locations, so both in the wetlands and in the rice fields. And this is control areas and sites with hunting, and the same control and hunting. Sorry for the Spanish in some of the slides. Then we also looked at several other components. So we looked at dissolved lead. Those were lead pellets. And then we also looked at dissolved lead in other components of the environment, including soil up here, the vegetation, and also the water, looking at all of those as means of exposure for species that actually, drink the water, and actually the vegetation uptake from the soil is also very significant. There are cattle grazing in these areas, but also many of the duck species and many waterfowl species actually eat the vegetation that is incorporating lead. So again, very significant differences for the most part between control and hunting sites, both in natural wetlands and in rice fields for the most part. We also looked at the wildlife in these locations. We focused on the 5 more commonly hunted species, all of those listed there. And for this, we did live captures of ducks when it was possible. And in those cases, we collected all kinds of information, some of them targeting specific indicators of lead poisoning, but also we wanted to just look at body condition overall in these birds, as we were trying to find if there were sublethal effects aside from evident mortality in these animals. Yep.
How long did it take to get the nice
Oh, that was only done in like about a month. We failed for the rest of the other 5 months in 2 different years. So when they were there and they came in the traps, it was easy, but when they were not interested or the wetlands were dry, it was very hard to get them. But they're not easily baited, and they're not easily attracted to traps. Their biggest sample size came from hunter-killed ducks. Those were unfortunately extremely abundant. We learned this the bad way, so we did necropsies in the field, extracting some target organs and tissues to look for lead. Some of those results I'll show you now, but then also some of these are ongoing studies that I don't have results for yet. So in these cases, our sample size was larger again, and we collected kind of the same type of information where we could, but also added some specific organ and tissue samples that we could not get from live birds, such as bone and liver, for example, where lead accumulates over time. So as we expected, we found high prevalences of lead shot ingestion in the birds that we sampled. There were some differences between the different species in the area, but overall, pretty much any species that we sampled had some sort of ingestion at one point. And of course, that only reflects very recent exposure to lead. And following up on that, we found lead in the livers of the ducks, which is actually also indicative of acute exposure. So the lead shot from the stomach goes into the bloodstream and then sits in the liver for a little while before going to other tissues and organs. And so pretty much 60% of the ducks had lead in their livers. And I used this little kind of like street signal here. So green were those that were above the threshold, but still supposedly not supposed to show clinical signs, but the yellows and the reds are all dangerously high. That got even worse when we looked at bones, which indicate long-term exposure. So this is exposure in the ducks over their lifetime, which in many cases is not that long. But all of the samples we tested had lead in them. All of them were significant, and there were quite a few animals in each of the groups that had very high levels of lead in their bones. Yep. We used the humerus. Yeah. And that was, it is standardized. Sometimes it's tibiotarsus, sometimes it's humerus, and we always use the left unless it was broken during the hunting, and then we use the right. The range of lead in the blood of ducks that we caught alive was also pretty significant. So we had about 30% of them that were acutely exposed at the moment of sampling, and many of them also, again, at quite significant levels. One of the disturbing things for us was that we really didn't see very many animals during the captures displaying clinical signs of lead intoxication, which was kind of abnormal. We did have 3 birds that showed distress when we captured them, and that actually we had to wait on for a while before they were recovered enough for release. After sampling, they got more stressed out than the rest, but we had no mortalities associated with this. As I said, we were trying to document sublethal effects of lead. So one of the things we did was do multiple correlations from lead levels in the liver and associate that with body condition or spleen mass as an indicator of immune function conflicts or issues, and we found some evidence of that. And the same with the blood. We found the normal expected abnormalities that you would expect in lead-poisoned birds. So all of these was expected, yet at the same time a little bit surprising because, like I said, we didn't really find many indicators of the birds being acutely poisoned at the time of sampling. All of those studies, and I really kind of like summarized, those are both published in papers, and I can give you the references or the papers later if you're interested. I did want to mention also that we had access to yellow anaconda samples during that time. One of the study areas was right by the area where the hunting takes place, the duck hunting, and our sampling areas for ducks. This one was very remote and where there's no hunting. And we actually found lead in the blood of the anacondas in this location. And one of the most commonly regurgitated items in these anacondas when we captured them was ducks and other kinds of waterfowl. So we didn't explore this further, but there is some evidence of even very unexpected species getting poisoned. One thing that I thought I would mention, just a few little examples because you're students, and I want to encourage you to think about transdisciplinary engagement and thinking outside of the box and just the veterinary toolbox. So for a number of the aspects of this study, we engaged with other schools, with other professions. So we worked with engineers, with physicists, and people working in IT and informatics, and developed a set of tools. So for example, one thing we wanted to measure was the resistance of bones in ducks exposed to lead, because there is this mechanism by which lead replaces calcium in the bones, so the bones tend to become more fragile over time. So we tried the basics, the densitometry and other things that are used in human medicine. They didn't work. So then we developed this mechanical device that is basically a press that just provided just very stable and measurable force on the bones, and we measured the force that it took to break the bones and use that as a calibration. So anyway, that was also actually an undergraduate veterinary medicine degree thesis. So another thing that we did, again, with this was encourage students from other schools to do their theses on topics that were relevant for our study. So for example, we had an environmental engineer who tried to find accurate measures of lead in the environment by using geomagnetism, different methods. And then we had another student doing research into measuring lead with lasers in vegetation as a cheaper way to do it than what it costs to get the samples and send them to the lab and all that. The other component of this is the human health side. And unfortunately, in the area where the study takes place and where all the hunting occurs, the most rural communities in that area are very poor, and they often come to the hunting lodges to pick up the ducks at the end of the day, and they eat them. So they're also being exposed to lead in this way. We did a few studies originally kind of to assess indirect exposure. So one of the things we looked at was at the lead in the meat that people normally eat, and we measured lead at the site of where the pellet was lodged in the breast muscle, and then in two other different sections in the pathway of the lead shot. And we actually, wrong way. So we actually measured lead. This is in the area of the shot where the pellet was lodged, and then as we move away, then we get lower amounts of lead. But there's still traces of lead in this. And the reason we did this is because when people find the shot when they're eating, they often take it out and spit it out. But still, removing the shot does not remove the lead that is in the muscle already and that you eat regardless. So the other way that people eat duck meat commonly is by pickling it, and they actually normally pickle it and let it sit for a while and then consume it later. So what we did was pickles, and you can see here an x-ray of the pickles that we used just by using the ducks that we had from our study. And many of them had quite a few lead shot fragments in there that we did not remove. And then we pickled the meat, and we found lead in the ones that were freshly made, but not very high levels. But when that sat for 30 days, the acid in the pickle actually releases a lot of the lead, and that becomes very, very toxic for people. So only last year were we able to finally get an MD willing to work with us, because, of course, we tried several times, but MDs were normally shy about this, and the public health and the government also did not really want to know what was there in people. But Dr. Nicolas Lojacono there is actually working with us very actively and is using this for his PhD. And we're looking at chronic exposure that we're doing through a tooth fairy campaign. So we're taking these urns to schools and asking kids for donations of their baby teeth. Sorry, I'm thinking of the word in Spanish, couldn't remember. So the baby teeth, and hopefully we can look at lead exposure throughout their short lifetimes with that. And then we're also planning to do a adult human pilot study looking at, we'll do surveys first to assess the level to which people consume duck meat, hopefully have a control and an affected group, and then run mostly lead measurements in blood, but also hopefully in other tissues, maybe hair or whatever we can get donated. So that's going to start this year, and we're really looking forward to these outcomes, to these results. So one of the things that is, for me, kind of unexplainable is that there is so much literature out there and so many facts that point and are clearly indicated that lead is bad for the health of everything and everyone. Yet we continue to use this, and there's a lot of resistance to change. And this is one of the few cases, I think, in which there's actually a solution to the problem, yet, again, it is not easily implemented. So in the environment, in different locations where lead has been banned, where lead shot has been banned, there is a positive effect that can be shown. There are several studies that show that after the implementation of the ban, the levels of lead in the animals actually go down. So regulations do have a positive impact, even though removal of lead from the environment will likely take over 100 years, or that's what the literature says. The other thing is that there are plenty of replacements for lead ammunition. And again, this is a part of the question that becomes so conflictive, is because there is so much resistance to change from the hunting community. So again, you have a solution, you have an antidote or a replacement, and yet still the change is hard to come along. And that is one of the reasons why, even though the technology is there, the proof that it works is there, very few countries around the world have actually implemented full bans. So the ones in black are basically the ones that have total bans. The gray ones are the ones that have some partial bans. Yellow is a country with a voluntary ban, which doesn't seem to work very well in many places. And then countries, the ones in red, are those where hunting occurs, but there is no ban whatsoever. We should update this, though. This is from 2009, because Argentina does have a ban on lead now, partial. But anyway, this is just to show you that even though the alternatives exist, there is a lot of resistance, and it doesn't only come from underdeveloped nations. It comes also from many sectors in the developed world as well. And I guess that the reason why is because this is a very complex problem. It involves all kinds of sectors, and there are many, many stakeholders engaged in the solution to this problem, not only contributing to it, but also that need to be a part of the solution. So one of our biggest challenges has been throughout the project. I mean, the science was fairly easy. The challenge is also is how you translate that science into policy and make that change happen. And you do that basically by engaging all of those key stakeholders. There is no way around it. So we spent a lot of time and effort over these last 7 or 8 years working very, very closely with the community and with the governments first to make sure that the data we were accumulating got to them in a clear way and that they understood the significance of those findings. So some governments were very concerned when they saw that and actually acted very quickly in implementing partial bans as a precautionary measure until we actually completed the study. Some helped us through the process. Others still remain very resistant to change because there's a lot of lobbying from the hunting and outfitter side, of course, to counterbalance what we're showing. So, like I said, we did get some success and bans. There are bans in progress now in 4 different provinces in Argentina. Some are progressive bans, so 1 year it's 25%, the next is 50% of your hunting quota if you don't use lead shot, and in some cases it was a total ban from start of. But this has been very lowly implemented, almost not implemented at all. And the main reason is because there is no alternative to lead shot in Argentina currently available. So even if hunters want to change, they really don't have access to non-toxic ammunition. What they see is with the bans in place, what happens is that their quotas get reduced. So the number of animals they can hunt is reduced, and by that mechanism, the impact in the environment is lessened, but still it's not the outright solution because we're impacting their activity. Like I said, one of our key stakeholders in this and our key partners actually were the hunters and the hunting outfitters. We had a ton of activities with them. We even had Danish experts. Denmark is one of the only countries in the world that's banned all uses of lead for more than 30 years now. We had them with us, teaching the hunters, talking to the hunters in hunter language, which is very important. It's not you talking to them, it's them, their peers talking to them. We did shooting clinics with non-toxic ammunition just so they would see how effective it is and that it actually works. We actually worked also very closely with ammunition manufacturers there. They went on all these wild ideas, things that have been tested in other places, like coating lead shot with copper to see if that would be a solution. We did all the studies for them, and it doesn't work, but we already knew it wouldn't work, but it's okay. We just had to work with them to show them that it wasn't the best option and that we needed to work on steel shot instead. And of course, we did a lot of community outreach, and the rest of the talk is going to be about that. And basically try to engage students and schools and the rural communities around these wetlands and the landowners also, and all of the activities of our research, so that they would actually see that the soil cores that they were picking up from their own property that we later analyzed had the lead pellets. So it wasn't something that we were telling them and it wasn't a story. They were actually looking at it, and actually they were part of the sample collection process and could see it with their own eyes. And the same with the ducks. We would open the ducks with them, and they would see the lead shot and the gizzards of the ducks. So one of the other problems that relate to or that affect sustainability of hunting relate to the hunting quotas. And many of the quotas are implemented in country are okay, might be reasonable if we knew the numbers in the duck populations, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But the reality is even these conservative duck bag quotas are not respected. So in one of these provinces where hunters are allowed to take 10 ducks per person per day, we know that in some cases they get up to 375, and and that is probably not really, it's pretty bad. So the government doesn't really have a lot of power to control what's going on. So unlike the US, where you have all of these really cool statistics about how many ducks are harvested every year, and then that can lead into good management, we don't have any of that. Well, because it's a lie, right? I mean, if we're supposed to get 10, but then we get 375, our statistics are off. So, and then the other thing that is missing in that equation is that we don't have waterfowl counts. We just do not know the size of the population. So all of your faces are going like, so how do you set a hunting quota if you don't know what your population is? I guess you throw the dice at the beginning of the season. I really don't know what the mechanism is, but that is how it's done. It's just a big guesstimate at this point. So we have no idea if the populations are increasing, if they're actually decreasing. There's no baseline data whatsoever. So the other problem affecting this, and I don't want to make this gory, depressing picture, but definitely in the time that we've been in these locations, these are satellite images of the areas with a lot of wetlands here and a lot of green, and this is all transformed only 6 years later for agriculture mostly. So you go from wetlands with tons of birds into rice fields and soybean, and that is happening very quickly in most places. Most of the countries in Latin America, I would say, are heavily producing food now for the rest of the world, and this is what happens. Natural environments get transformed into crops and agriculture. So what happens when you lose the wetlands is that you lose all of the valuable ecosystem services they provide. And that leads to very significant changes impacting the entire ecosystem, but also the people and the wildlife that live in those locations. So this is kind of like the road we're going down. So kind of like all of those last few reasons together is the reason why we established what we call the Earth Guardians Network, which is basically a big conservation education effort that we started a few years ago, trying to increase the value and appreciation of people for their wetlands and try and encourage wetland conservation, not from the government side top down, but from the bottom up through the communities. So as I just said, what we want to do is increase the appreciation of those wetlands, and the mechanism we're envisioning for that is mostly to be able to use the wetlands as school or educational tools, mostly through schools. So we're working with many schools in these rural areas and encouraging them to use the wetlands in their backyard as living classrooms, learn about the richness and the diversity that is there, some things that they had never seen before. They did not know that this was right there for them. And we're also using citizen scientists, both adults and school children and teachers, to perform waterfall counts. Like I just said, like I said previously, we're missing data on how many animals are actually there. So this is a way that we can actually contribute some of those numbers, at least initially. It's a slow process, but hopefully working hand in hand with the government, we can actually sooner rather than later get some good estimates. For that, we developed, again, in partnership with other disciplines, we developed some software specifically for collecting data in the field and uploading it to a database. And we're using trained counters, so people who actually are good or familiar with the species and getting those numbers and waterfowl counts into the database. But we're also working with amateur counters, so the school teachers and the students who actually once a year in October go out to the wetlands on the same day, and we do these synchronized waterfowl counts and slowly building everybody's confidence and actually also validating the data that is being collected by using this paired system where we have the trained and the amateur scientists at the same time. We developed a ton of educational tools, some guides to the biodiversity of wetlands, and little puzzles that kids can do in the classroom before they head out to the field so that they know how to recognize the species and learn about them, and it's easier for them once they're out there. And we're working on a documentary now that hopefully will be available for me to show you next year. I had a little 10-minute trailer, but it was going to take up too much time now. And it was all in Spanish, so. But we'll have an English version for you. And our last, but not least, strategy has been trying to find some sort of protection for these little tiny remaining wetlands in these highly modified landscapes. So these are wetlands that, even though they're not they do not qualify as important bird areas, which is one way of protecting them, or Ramsar sites. These are all international agreements that provide some sort of protection for wetlands. These do not qualify because they're inserted in highly modified environments, but we call them strategic bird sites for education. So we're trying to develop this new classification, a protected area where they do have value for educational purposes and have landowners set them aside in their property, but also some of these are right by towns and they're owned by the county, for example, and then they can be managed and declared a CEA for their acronym. That's the acronym because of the name in Spanish. So that started last year, and at this point we have 3 of these protected areas established. We have 6 duck counting teams actively counting in the schools. Some of those have done it for 3 years in a row now. We have 14 schools engaged in these in the Earth Guardians Network from 3 different provinces, and hopefully that is only going to grow. So far, the response has been extremely positive, and everybody seems enthusiastic about the idea. We actually get more requests than we can actually handle. And with that, I will just like to close. I do have to thank a ton of people that are not here with me, but the studies were done by many, many people from several different universities. students, many actually students from the U.S. who volunteer with us. And then, of course, hunters, the hunting associations, the governments in the provinces where we worked, and, of course, the funding, our funding sponsors. And I will take questions, of course. Thanks. Questions? Yep.
Do you know why alternatives to lead shot aren't available?
Mm-hmm.
Being done to make them available?
Yeah, a good question. They are not available because it was not in the tradition to do this. Since the bans have been implemented, we've had I would say one main conflicting issue, and that is that the current economic strategy in the country is to not allow imports of any kinds. They want to promote the made in Argentina industry. So what happens then is that local manufacturers have to switch their entire production chain from lead to steel. And a few have expressed interest. They have actually modified some of their facilities. But then when it comes to importing the steel shot, which you need to import the pellet still to fill the cartridges, they've had containers stuck in customs for about 2 years. So it's not working that way. We've been lobbying, or helping to lobby, actually, I would say, with the government at higher levels to see if they can actually release this as an exception and see if we can get it done. But who knows? It's a tough uphill road. So my new solution, which I didn't mention to you, is that I might be manufacturing the non-toxic. I'm serious. I'm meeting tomorrow with the business school here to see if I can make that happen. Yeah, I mean, nobody's making it happen. Maybe I should. Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of training,
Mm-hmm.
because it sounds like you got out into the community, they saw the findings. How do you do that training so that it's effective and done properly?
Good question. We've, in our interdisciplinary approach, we've engaged tons of educators in the process. And we are actually now applying to Disney for a grant to actually monitor the effectiveness of our education interventions, because we want to be sure. Right now we're gauging our success just on the number of schools that become engaged and the annual waterfall counts that they perform and whatever, but we don't know exactly how much of their attitudes have changed or whatever. So we're actually hoping that we can measure that over the next year, and hopefully I have a better answer for you next year. Thanks.
What percentage of your hunters come from out of the country to come and hunt?
99%.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is the other frustrating aspect of this, because in most of the countries of origin of those hunters, lead is not allowed. So they come to a place where there are regulations, they're just not observed or not enforced, and then they shoot whatever with no problem. So it's also one of those things where, we are aware and we behave in one way in one place where they're watching, and we behave very badly in places where nobody is watching, and leave the lead for somebody else to worry about. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I was wondering how much they actually eat and how much they just want a head or a trophy from.
No, this is very unlike other kinds of game. People just leave them out there. They do not care at all. I've been to several of the lodges, and I've only seen them request CITES permits for trophies in very, very few limited cases. And I've actually been surprised at how quickly they got the CITES permits. So they obviously have mechanisms of doing that we do not, because to get a blood sample out of the country for us takes forever, and they do it very easily. But at the same time, that is with these, they just leave them in the field. They don't care. Dove hunting is even worse. It's just for the fun of shooting. And the website, if you Google Argentina hunting waterfowl or doves, you'll be, it's horrible what you'll find. It's just shoot until your barrel is so hot you can't hold your gun anymore and whatever. how hard it is to implement in people or wildlife or what?
In wildlife, in the water, for example, if I want to set up a lab for the techniques that are needed.
Well, there are some kits that you can take into the field with a little portable analyzer, and that is pretty good. It's usually done, that's what is used here and in many field studies for a quick assessment. The detection limit is, of course, quite higher than what you would get with lab procedures. So did I just do that? Stop. On. Okay. Okay. Couldn't stop the thing. But the techniques in the lab are more sophisticated. You need very clean environments and very, very strict procedures because you can get contamination from any source in lead. Actually, when you need to buy the appropriate standards to test them for blood or for liver or for vegetation. All of those have different standards in which the machines need to be calibrated. It's mass spectral photometry, I think, with atomic absorption. So, yeah. There's microwave technology now that is supposedly also better, but very few labs in Argentina have that capacity. And it just becomes very expensive. So for the human studies that we want to do now, it's very costly.
Is there any kind of outlet for shooting ranges? I mean, if you're a guy who doesn't really care about what exactly you're shooting, that potentially be a resource for people who just want to shoot for fun. I mean, that doesn't really solve the lead problem, but maybe if it's from a population sustainability standpoint.
So you mean increasing the number of people that go out to the shooting ranges versus?
Are there ranges available for people who don't?
Yeah, but it seems like I'm not a hunter, so I don't know. But it seems like part of the thrill is being out, and it's supposed to be challenging, which it really isn't, because these things fly by the thousands, and you just shoot at the cloud, and you will get something dropping out of the sky. I mean, really, I've been with them. Yeah, I mean, it's like I don't see why. And when we met with our Danish experts that came, and people were complaining to them, the hunters, and they said, this is not about the shot that you use. It's about the 80 kilos behind the gun. That's where the skill is. So if you're a good shot, it doesn't matter what you're shooting. You have to be proficient in killing your target, no matter what you use. So it's a sport. So it should be that you have to want to be better, but that's not really the case. Yeah, and it's pretty sad with the shooting ranges because lead is allowed in all of them. Actually, even the Olympics, shooting is one of the disciplines of the sports, and lead is still used in the Olympics. And there's many countries in Europe actually fighting that now because it's incredible. So in some countries, and actually the reasons are probably not environmental. So some of the Olympic medalists are saying, in my country, I'm not allowed to practice with lead, yet when I go to the competition, then I'm using lead, and the whole thing works very differently, so it's not working for them that way. But hopefully they'll change it. It's pretty sad. Mm-hmm.
Has there been any interest in neighboring countries in following some of the changes that have been done?
Yeah, I mean, there are two answers for that. One is that hunting is really not that big in many of the neighboring countries, and actually in many it's prohibited for waterfowl. Other game are allowed to be hunted, but so it hasn't really become an issue for them yet. We'll see what happens. And again, if you go to larger game or deer or whatever, then it's a different issue. So we're not going there yet. The other thing I was going to say is that the Convention of Migratory Species, which is an international convention in which many, many countries around the world, I don't know the number, participate, actually launched campaign last year to pass a resolution during their meeting in Quito in November of last year of 2014 that would regulate or encourage countries to regulate poisoning or stop poisoning of birds. And it had many factors in it, including pesticides, rodenticides, agriculture, herbicides and things like that, but it also included lead shot. And that we provided information to almost every single country in Latin America from our studies, and actually all of them voted in favor of that resolution in Quito, which is good news. The thing is that those are not binding, so countries do not have to do what the CMS says, but it is highly recommended that they ban lead within the next 3 years. So hopefully that will happen. We don't know. We're kind of trying all the ways that we can that this can actually stop.